Hi, it's David with Oklahoma Ham Radio, the YouTube channel, and oklahomahamradio.com. Please take a minute to, do those YouTube things, hit the like button, subscribe, those types of things. The like helps people find this content, and the subscribe lets you know when new content's being produced, along with that bell. If you would, I would appreciate it. In this video, this is going to start a series of videos on this Phaser Digital Mode Transceiver. It's really built for FT8. It's a 4-watt single sideband transceiver. This video shows step one of day one, and I get in the box, unpacking all that good stuff. But plus shows the actual first step of the construction of this radio. Stick around, check it out, see if it's something that you'd like to embark on. Maybe you're looking at something new in the hobby. Maybe you're familiar with soldering circuit boards. Maybe you're not. It could be something that you want to get into. Stick around, check it out. Thanks. So I did get this box, and I'd ordered maybe a month prior. I think it takes a while to get these, just simply because of the situation with that we find ourselves in with the human malware virus, and also just supply chains being destroyed when it comes to technology or components. And along with that, supply chains being destroyed due to shipping. So it's not that this shipped from outside the United States, but all the parts that they use to put these packages together, these kits together, shipped from China or wherever, most likely China. But you can see that the box is definitely sealed up very well. I should have gone and gotten a knife. I was using a screwdriver to try to get into this box, but normally it works on the stuff you get from Amazon, but not this so much. So it was packed well. You see that there's a 17 meter radio there. It comes in, like I said, two bags that are stapled together with all the parts inside of those bags and labeled very nicely. There's, I didn't see which version that was. It's probably a 20 meter or a 40 meter. But there's another one coming out that's the other one. So you can see all the parts. There's a 40, so the other's a 20 meter. But you can see all the parts that are in there. They're taped on those cards and identified on the cards. So, and of course, the packing slip. So here I'm just getting my area ready. That I just moved are some 3D printed cases. That's the package. That's what it looks like. And I'll open them up and show what's on those cards here in just a second. I go get a bowl and come back so I don't lose parts, hopefully, or drop them on the floor. However, that doesn't always work out well. So cut the bags open, obviously, to get the stuff out, and I show what's on those cards here. So each one of the cards is separated. Obviously, there's a picture that you can refer back to. But each one of the cards is separated into the types of things that they are. So there's the wire for the toroids. Looks like those are some diodes or capacitors of some sort. No, those are capacitors and ICs. I'm sorry, ICs. Those are capacitors and toroids. There's the circuit board. There's a bag or a sheet of resistors. Couple of them, actually, couple sheets. There are quite a few small capacitors that go on the board, which is, makes sense. Let's see, that looks like some, oh, those are the sockets for the ICs. Those look like I can't tell. Anyway, each part is taped to one of these cards or in a bag that's taped to these cards. Those are resistors like crazy, capacitors, and various other things. There is a card that's specific for each radio. That's just one card that makes it, 17 meter, 20 meter, or whatever. So here I bust open the board. What I will say is I had to go get a razor blade to go cut those parts off of the boards. You can see that the circuit board does have a few surface mounted components already installed. I think there's 2 resistors and there's, I think, 3 or 4 ICs that are surface mount components. Everything else is all through hole. It's been a while since I've done some through hole stuff. I like surface mount stuff a lot better, but you've got to have the equipment to do that. So here I just slide this into a holder for circuit boards that is adjustable. Get it all set up. Try to get things organized a little bit on my desk so that I can work on some stuff here. Getting it adjusted to where it's not going to fall out with this type of device is pretty important. You don't want it sliding on you while you are in the middle of soldering. So make sure you can tilt it, pivot it, swivel it, so on and so forth. And then, of course, trying to clean up as time goes on, as you do things instead of waiting until your desk is a pit to clean up. So that's a good theory and a good goal, but it never works out well for me. So I went through and counted all the components. It's a good thing that I did. There were a few components missing on the 17 meter package or board. I'm sorry, the 17 meter radio that were pretty important. There were 2 ICs and 1 capacitor that were missing. So anyway, I would go through and take inventory of what all you have. Now I was able to move on to the other 2 radios without any problem. And I start building the 20 meter. I actually built the 17 meter but was unable to complete it. But I did that to make sure that I understood what all the instructions were. And I pulled 2 ICs and a capacitor out of the 20 meter kit. Used those to do some tests, made sure everything was good, and then popped them back off the board. So you'll see me reference a board that's built here in a little bit when I start doing the build. That's because I had actually already built the 17 meter. I tried using the instructions on the iPad. I wish I had printed them out. It sure would have made things easier. So I start the build, and the first thing I do is grab some rubbing alcohol, put it on a rag, and clean the back of that board really well before starting to solder. It definitely helps not to have any impurities on those contact points. So I normally do this in 4 different directions. Go across both directions and go diagonally both directions, and just make sure that it's perfectly clean before starting out. And then, of course, move the rubbing alcohol, away from anything that has heat. So here I put it back in the board, or in the holder, and I think it falls out on me here. So this goes back to making sure that you have that board securely attached. Yep, there you go, slid right out. So make sure that the board's securely attached and in the right orientation so that you know, when it says do something to the left or to the right in the instructions, or to the back or front of the board, you have that orientation correct. So the first thing I do here, um, so the instructions are very thorough. So it's broken out to where you can install components and then do a test. At the bottom of each section, there is a map that shows you where everything goes. So if you cannot find a component as to where it goes, there's dots on the next page of the instructions that show where the components for that section go. So here I put the IC holders, the little sockets in place, and get going on that. I speed the video up here just because it's pretty boring to watch somebody solder these things on, and I really struggled with how to record this well to where you can see what's going on the board. Had a camera on my head, so I apologize for any jerkiness that happens and being a little bit high. But I taped those IC sockets down and then hit the back, basically hit a corner of one of them, or actually all of them, with some solder just so that I can go back and make sure that those IC sockets are pushed up against the board pretty well. And I apologize here for the recording. I'm going to switch to another view so that you can see a little better maybe. So I sped this portion of the video up quite a bit. I just solder on the IC sockets. There's roughly 19 capacitors, small capacitors that get soldered in place. The power piece, or the power connector, I did have to make a power cable for the radio to plug in off of my power supply there. So what I end up doing, instead of cutting each one of those capacitors away from the little cardboard strip that they're on, is I just cut the ends off, make them shorter, and just cut them off of that board. There's plenty of room left on those capacitors to fit through the board without any problem. Now there is a diode that you have to bend. The gray stripe goes at the top of the diode, and then the lead out of the gray strip on the diode wraps around or pivots over. They have great instructions for it, but then you've got to make sure that you get the right side of the diode in the right spot. So it describes it right here in the instructions very well. So get that done, and then start, this is where I'm just cutting those capacitors off instead of trying to strip them off that tape in that board. And that seemed to work very well compared to trying to cut through that tape on, I think, like I said, 19 capacitors to get them installed. So I'm going to jump ahead here. So I've got them all cut off, and you go down to the next page and it shows a certain colored dot that shows where each one of these capacitors needs to be placed. I just push them through and then bend one of the legs over, and just make sure that you get all of those if you decide to do this project. Missing one could potentially be very bad, but it's what I did was started in the upper right hand side of the board. Really, it's the back right hand side of the board, and got all of those and just proceeded, let's see, clockwise around the board to try to find all of them. I did drop one of these on the floor, and I am colorblind, so it does not work real well for me to be able to see this stuff on the floor. My vacuum cleaner just came on. Let me turn it off real quick so it's not interfering with the recording here. Home automation's great until you try to do something like record a YouTube video. And of course the app updated, so. Alright, so anyway, I'm going through the board, putting all those on, and then I go through and solder them all on in place. One of the things I did with those IC sockets I didn't mention is I went around and made sure that there were no bridges connecting any of those, any solder bridges. And it's kind of easy to do when you've got things that are pretty close together. This is where I dropped that capacitor on the ground, and I crawl around for a while looking for it, so I'm going to skip ahead. Anyway, I looked for probably 10 minutes trying to find that one small capacitor. I've got 3 kits, so I can always grab a piece off another kit and get this one done. Order another part. I know what part's needed, so I'll just go out to DigiKey or somebody and order one. So I went ahead and continued putting those capacitors on the board, identifying where they all go and putting them down there, and yeah, soldering one leg on, straightening the back leg that I had bent to hold it in place back out, soldering that side on. Like I said, there's 19 of them, and this is at 20x speed right here, so I was very cautious, but to get them all in the right spot. But that document that they provide does show where they go, so that helps quite a bit, especially on 19 items. So I keep referencing back to the document, putting them in the board. Again, I apologize for the camera placement on the head, that I didn't quite get it low enough. I will make an attempt to get that better in future videos for this build. But here I'm just going through and identifying all of them. Now there is one mislabeled capacitor slot. So hopefully you've stuck around long enough in this video that you get this information. But there is a capacitor that is, I believe, labeled on the board as C40. Let me grab it and check real quick. Yes, on the board it's labeled as C40. In the documentation, it's labeled as C46. When you get that part of the instructions, it does tell you to place a capacitor in C46. So after searching for a while, you discover that C46 doesn't exist on the board, which is a good thing. But yeah, their documentation needs to be updated a little bit. Speaking of that, when you purchase one of these, make sure that you get the instructions that are specific to that board that you're building. On the left-hand side, it will tell you what revision of the board that you have. And it's important that you get the instructions for that revision. I checked that about 4 times just to make sure that I was on the right document, and in fact that document is incorrect for revision C of this board. For C40, it is labeled as C46 in the manual. Hopefully that helps somebody out. So here I'm just going through and making sure that the solder points are all really well tightened or really well soldered, and doing just a little bit of checking on the board. So the next thing to do is to solder in a couple of the three-prong ICs. Basically they're gates, I think, that are used for power. And you want to make sure to get the right ones, because if you don't get the right ones, double check, triple check, or put them in the wrong spot, you will blow the capacitors that you add in the next step. So just a word of caution, make sure to get those right so that it directs power correctly when you go through and do your test. So I get those soldered on, and there's the barrel connector for power gets soldered on also. I think I'm already skipped beyond that part. I think I see it on the board. There I'm referencing the board that I had already built that passed its tests and everything. That's the 17 meter board. But going through and making sure that there are no small solder bridges going on there. Making sure I've got that part soldered. You don't want to get that part too hot when you solder it, so what I normally do is I'll hit it real quick and then let it cool down, and then I'll go back, hit it again, let it cool down, and if I need to a third time, go hit it again and let it cool down. So don't let it get too hot. There are logic circuits that need to be working well, especially since the part that you're putting together initially is to control the power, and how, what's getting 3.3 volts versus 6 volts versus 12 volts. So go through, get both of those on, clip off the excess legs on the back, and then we've got these other capacitors that are I don't know what they're called actually, but they're the tube style capacitors. There's 3 of them that you'll need. The first 2 are the same, and then the third one is a larger capacitor. And the dimensions or the specifications are listed off in the instruction manual. So I get those on, and then I do some tests on the power. So this last section of video I'm going to slow back down, just because I want to give anyone who wants to pause the video a chance to see the board at the end of step 1. So here I'm putting on that last capacitor, but anyway, this should give you the ability to pause the video and see where things are at, see if what you've got lined up, or if you decide to build this, what you've got going on matches or not with where I'm at with a board that did test through okay. I'll show the tests at the end here, just to show that the board does pass those tests. So this is what the board looks like at the end of phase 1. You can pause here to take a look and see. But next thing to do is to test the board, and I go through that test here. So all the test requires is that you have a multimeter or a voltmeter and a 12 volt power supply plugged in. And all you do is you check 2 different points on the board. Both of them are in the IC sockets themselves, so it's not like you're in any danger of touching anything that's going to damage anything to do your test at all. So you're measuring for 6 volts on one location, 3.3 on the other. Make sure to unplug before you continue. So I want to show you where the documentation is real quick on the website. Very easy. Basically under documentation, you go to the version that you have, Rev C for me, for example, shows that picture at the top. I have referred back to that picture a couple times just to make sure that I was orienting a component in the correct direction. That's what those cards look like that have everything on them. There's the board. Here is the pin that I said was mislabeled. In the instructions, it says C46, and there it's C40. Here's the first page of the instructions, or the first step one, I guess, or assembly group one, which is for board power. And down here is an example of the locations. The green ones are all of those capacitors that need to be installed with step one. But you can see that they do a great job of identifying for you where on the board those components need to be placed. And it also shows you right here at the end, here's where you measure, and here's where you measured. It tells you what it needs, 3.3 volts and 6 volts, and where ground is that you can use. So it's the instructions are very good. They're very simple to follow. It is a very easy thing for, do step one, step two, step three. I will say that I'm taking it very slow here intentionally because I want to make sure that it's done right and all the solder points are great. I'm testing between each solder point that I put in. It does tell you, what type of solder to use and all that good stuff. The magnifying glass is definitely needed for me. Along with that, Scotch tape is going to be needed. Needle nose pliers, I've found definitely needed. Your diagonal cutters definitely are going to be needed. And, obviously a soldering iron is going to be needed. So now, again, this is for FT8. You need an app that can run FT8 that can connect to the audio input and output from your computer. So you need a computer, an antenna, audio cables, a power supply, or a battery would work also. But anyway, just want to say so far the build has been fun. The instructions are thorough. I was missing a few parts, as I mentioned, specifically these two for my 17 meter band, U1 and U4. That was problematic for me, but okay, I can find those. And I was short one of these capacitors, so not everything actually comes like this now, but it's nothing that's too difficult to figure out. I will also say that when you install this, and I'll mention it, make sure that that metal heat sink is not accidentally touching another component. Could be bad, short things out, make a lot of work go down the drain very quickly. So anyway, that's what the instruction manual looks like, and it is very thorough. So until I start day 2 tomorrow, 73. Thanks, guys.